So because my sewing videos will be taking a bit of a backseat due to the fact that I am broke, I decided to do something a little bit different from my usual content, which is to do episodic reviews of Project Runway, which is one of my favorite fashion shows and one of the only fashion shows that I know of. Well, it's not the only fashion show that I know of, but rather it's the most popular fashion show that I know of. And recently, and by recently I mean back in 2025, they released season 21 of Project Runway after about a 2-year hiatus, which I think is due to them building their own set and revamping the entire show. And I, for one, was very excited. So you can imagine my disappointment when I hated the entire season. Well, hate is a strong word. I strongly disliked this season, and that was for many reasons, but there are 2 main reasons why I did not enjoy watching season 21. And with all that being said, please welcome to my very constructed and very organized rant of why I think season 21 of Project Runway was a big disappointment. I also want to apologize in advance for some of the screenshots being very low quality. And that is because whenever I try to take a screenshot in the Hulu app, the image will come out just completely black. And they do that for legal reasons. So I had to take my phone and take pictures of my screen and then put that into the video, and so the quality may not be as good. So just a heads up. Also, if it seems like I'm looking off to the side, it's because I'm looking at the wrong camera. I'm filming on my tablet because, like I said in my previous video, my phone is completely out of space, so I'm using my tablet. My tablet has 2 cameras, and I ended up looking at the wrong camera, so it looks like I'm looking past the camera, but I promise I'm looking at the camera, it's just I'm looking at the wrong one. So I already watched the season when it came out, but for this review, I had the misfortune of having to rewatch it again and relive the secondhand embarrassment that I got from this season. So please subscribe. So if you've never seen Project Runway or never heard of Project Runway, I'll give you just a brief history of what the show is. Project Runway is a reality TV show that is a fashion competition that first premiered on December 1st in 2004. It was created by Eli Halsman and hosted by German-American model Heidi Klum. The show selects designers from all over America, giving them challenges, a limited budget for materials, and tight deadlines in hopes to win the show and build a name brand for themselves. I've been a fan of the show for many years. I started watching back when I was either a junior or senior in high school, and it's something that I put on the background of my sewing projects for motivation. However, there was a short period of time where I stopped watching the show completely, and that was because Tim Gunn was no longer the mentor and instead was replaced by a very successful designer and season 4 winner Christian Siriano. Now, I have nothing personally against Mr. Siriano. However, I was so used to seeing Tim Gunn on my TV screen that when he was no longer there, to me, there is no point in watching the show anymore. And instead, I replaced that hole with watching Making the Cut, which is basically a spin-off of Project Runway. And in my opinion, that show was really boring, and I think the concept was really stupid, and maybe I'll do a video on that as well. But then the panorama happened, and I had nothing to watch, so I went back and watched the seasons that I missed in order to catch up with everything. The most current season is season 21, and I believe season 22 is coming out later this year, but I might be wrong about that. Major spoilers, by the way. I will be showing who gets eliminated every episode, and I will be exposing who wins the entire season. So if you don't want any spoilers, I do encourage you to go watch the show yourself and to figure out whether you also think the season is as bad as I think it is. So season 21 aired back in 2025 on July 31st. The season cast 12 designers: Yushin Ha, Angelo Rosa, Alex Foxworth, VJ Floresca, Jesus Estrada and his twin brother Antonio Estrada, Ethan Munt, Joseph McRae, Madeline Maleficent, Melania Daly, Casey Black, and Joan Madison. 2 of the designers had already been on the show prior, like Casey, who was on season 19 and was eliminated in the first episode. Let's hope history doesn't repeat itself. And Jesus, who was on the show way back in season 7. I'm getting a little ahead of myself when I say this, but I'm just going to let you know ahead of time. The Estrada brothers are the main reason why I could not watch this show and why I did not like the season. They made watching this season unbearable. It got to the point where whenever there was a new episode released, I was not excited to see it because I knew there was going to be some nonsense that involved the 2 of them. So episode 1 begins and we are introduced to the designers as they give us a brief history of who they are as a designer. And right off the bat, my favorites are Yushin Ha, Joan Madison, Joseph McCrae, and Ethan Munt, also known as Utica. The first challenge is actually a group challenge, and I believe from the history of Project Runway, this is the first time where in the first episode they immediately put the designers into groups, which I am not the biggest fan of. I like to see the individual designers design on their own and not have to make a whole collection where their aesthetic can sometimes be watered down because they have to fit into a certain aesthetic for the challenge, but that's just me. So the designers are split into 2 teams of 6, and they're actually considered houses instead of teams, and one is the House of Princess while the other is the House of Villain. In whichever house you're in, you have to make a cohesive collection for that house. Once they've made the collection, they will then show what they made at the Enchanted United Palace. And the twist is that they only have 1 day to complete this challenge. Casey is freaking out a bit because on her season, she got sent home in the first episode that was also a group challenge. Oh, I guess they have done group challenges in the first episode now that I say that out loud. It's been a while since I've seen season 19, so there's a strong chance I just completely forgot that they did that. So Casey is a little scared that she's going to go home on the first episode again and does not want a repeat of what happened last time. They are given 48 minutes to brainstorm, and then they are off to Move, which is very popular and pretty pricey fabric store in the fashion district of New York City. As the houses go off to discuss a theme for their collection, Antonio, who is in the House of Princess, strong arms his entire team into doing a butterfly theme. When you think of princess, I'm sure butterflies do come to mind, and I don't think that was a bad suggestion made by Antonio. However, the problem that I have is that he didn't really let his team collectively agree on that theme. He kind of just took charge and just assumed everyone would be okay with that theme and not letting them come up with other ideas for the collection. The reason why he strongly suggested butterflies was because he had a piece of fabric that he was able to bring from home that has a butterfly pattern on it, which I guess this is a new rule because I don't remember the show allowing the designers to bring fabrics from where they were originally to the show and incorporate it into the design if they choose to do so. There's a strong possibility that they have done this in the past, but I might have forgotten because it's been a really long time since I've seen the earlier seasons. So as expected, the people on his team aren't really vibing with the butterfly theme, and Joan, who is one of my favorites, says, and I quote, "I gotta see this fabric because if it doesn't speak to me, I'm not using it." Antonio shows his team the fabric, and I'm not really feeling the fabric. It's not an ugly fabric. It is pink and it does have butterflies on it. However, I think the pattern is a little too chaotic and way too much is happening for a princess outfit. And you can kind of see in Joan's face, and she even expresses how she doesn't like the fabric. And I quote her again saying, "I'm not here to use basic butterfly fabric." The rest of the team is also not vibing with the fabric, and Joseph McCrae says in his confessional that he did not like the butterfly theme and he was going to do it anyway, and he was just going to do whatever he wanted to do, which is the total opposite of what you should be doing when the challenge is to make a cohesive collection, but okay. So now the designers are at Mood and are given $600 each and 45 minutes to shop for fabric and materials. This next part is kind of irrelevant, but I felt the need to say it because the show kept focusing on it for a couple seconds. Joseph McCrae insists that everyone refers to him by his first and last name as one word. So he's going around Mood and the employees are helping him find whatever he needs to find. And so when they say, "Okay, Joseph, will help you," he's like, no, Joseph McCrae. He did the exact same thing when the designers were all arriving. So when they would introduce themselves, he would say, "Hi, my name is Joseph McCrae." And when they would say, "Oh, hi, Joseph," he's like, no, Joseph McCrae. I mean, he's trying to build a business. He's trying to make a brand for himself. So you got to start somewhere. House of Villains is way more organized than House of Princess because as we're watching them shop, House of Princess is just grabbing all kinds of fabric and colors and materials. And Christian points this out and reminds them, hey, you're making a cohesive collection. Nothing here looks put together is basically what he says. And then Antonio responds to him by saying, "It's 2026, baby." And I'm just there like, was this supposed to be some sort of joke where he's implying that a collection doesn't have to be cohesive? Because if that's the case, he is sorely mistaken. It is the utmost importance that your collection is cohesive and looks connected and looks like it came from the same place. I really don't know what he meant when he said this. So we're back in the workroom and the houses are working on their collections, and we learned that VJ, who was in the House of Villains, was actually on Project Runway Philippines. So like Casey and Jesus, she has some prior experience being on the show. And speaking of Jesus, I'm going to be saying Jesus and Antonio's name a lot this series, so be prepared for that. Him and VJ get into a bit of an argument over a sewing machine. VJ had threaded a machine that she was using to make her garment, and then she got up to make some alterations, and then Jesus, who's also in the House of Villains, came by and sat in that same machine and started using it, so that when VJ came back and saw that he was using the same machine that she was using, she's like, hey, that machine is mine, I'm using it. And Jesus says, well, actually, this isn't yours, and every machine in here belongs to everybody, just use a different one. So she just goes over to a different machine, threads it again, and starts using that one. Now, in my opinion, they're both right and wrong in their claims, but I'm more so on VJ's side than I am on Jesus' side. Jesus's? I'm more so on VJ's side than I am on his. Jesus is right in saying that none of the machines belong to any specific designer and that they can use any machine that they want to use. However, VJ is right in saying that if you see a machine that's been threaded, it's obviously in use, and common courtesy would tell you to just go to a different one. That's like seeing someone go into a parking space and then you going into that same parking space despite the fact that you saw someone trying to get into the same space. The parking spot doesn't belong to anybody, but it's common courtesy to let the person who's actively getting into the parking spot to take it and not to just take it for yourself. Anyways, Jesus goes over to the ironing station where his brother is, and he starts bad-mouthing VJ behind her back, and in his confessional, he calls her the B word, and not in the endearing way, in the very much insulting way. And it was this petty argument and Antonio's little trying to pull the whole butterfly theme thing that made me realize that I was going to have a big problem with these two. So Christian walks in, he does his little walk around to give his advice to the designers. He starts with Casey, who's in the House of Princess. Her dress is this baby pink brocade with some tulle, and looking at it, this dress looks like how her team behaves. A mess. Granted, the way the dress looks now may change later, but it's not looking good for her. Christian offers his advice to make her dress look better by focusing on the waist and the proportions of the dress to make it look more organized. Casey, she just decides to ignore him completely. She says in her confessional that she's done a waist like this before and that she loves doing asymmetry and that she does it a lot in her work and that she doesn't want to give it up. And I just want us to remind ourselves that she went home first on the first episode in a group challenge and she doesn't want that to happen again. But she won't take advice from Christian Soriano, who was the youngest to win the show and built an entire empire around his name. You're not going to take advice from that guy. Okay. Christian talks to Joseph McCrae next, and Joseph McCrae only has a jacket done at the moment. I think the jacket is really cool. However, if you were to put his look next to Casey's look, how are these two looks in any way, shape, or form connected? How is this cohesive? What about these two looks is giving, yeah, these came from the same exact fashion house? Christian has to remind him that this is supposed to be a cohesive collection, but for some reason he and no one else on his team is listening, which brings me to the second reason why I don't like this season. Some of the designers, the Estrada brothers, seem to show no respect towards their mentor or the judges, and this behavior just becomes more blatant as the season goes on. Christian talks to Antonio next, and he says that his look is very boring and that it needs to be more, quoting, "My intern can do this in 30 minutes." Antonio's dress is in no way bad, however, compared to his fellow teammates, it is lacking. Antonio then decides it's a good idea to say in his confessional that he is a Gemini, does not take criticism well, and doesn't like being told what to do. So then what are we doing here, Antonio? Why did we agree to be on the show? Why did we audition for the show? Because that is the majority of what is going to happen. You're going to be critiqued and judged on the looks that you make. As a matter of fact, that is the entire fashion industry. You're going to be poked, prodded, critiqued, dissected, and judged for everything that you make for the rest of your career. So if you can't take criticism, then you shouldn't be a fashion designer. Anyways, next is the House of Villains, and there's not much to say because, like I said earlier, they're way more organized than House of Princess. Christian did advise Jesus to do more with his outfit, which is a similar advice that he gave to his brother Antonio. And he told Ethan, aka Utica, to make sure that it doesn't go too costumey, which I expected because Utica comes from a background of drag and is used to doing these big, elaborate looks, so I kind of saw that coming. To make sure the collection looks put together, the House of Villains decided to put all their outfits together in a line to make sure that everything looks good. But for some reason, Jesus doesn't believe that their collection looks cohesive, despite his teammates saying that it looks fine, pointing out that the floral details in their outfits are what make it connected. Jesus suggests that they should incorporate lace into their looks because Yushin's outfit is the only one that has lace. However, Yushin says that there is no more lace. So then Jesus tells Yushin that he would basically have to cut up his outfit so that he could give lace to the rest of his teammates to make the collection look more connected. This, to me, was very unnecessary. There was no need to tell someone else that they have to cut up their lace to give to other people because their collection, to me, looks fine. Everything looks cohesive. Everything looks together. It's connected. They even pointed out that there's a floral aspect to it, so they don't need to change much of anything. But if the team believed that something did need to change, I don't think it would be fair to Yushin to tell him to basically destroy his outfit. Jesus is trying to make it seem like Yushin's lace throws off the entire cohesion of the collection, which is not the case. And even in the final look, you can barely notice the lace. And then one of the most infuriating interactions happened between the two of them. Jesus asks Yushin if he's ever made a collection before. Yushin says, yes, I have made a collection. But then Jesus decides to just step up and say, well, collection is when the outfits are cohesive and look like they came from the same. The fact that he just ignored Yushin's answer and decided to go into the definition of what a collection is was very, very condescending. I don't know why he felt the need to do that, and they go back and forth in this argument, but I'm fully on Yushin's side, and Jesus once again starts insulting Yushin in his confessional, calling him a poopy female dog, which is the age-appropriate way of putting things. So it's the day of the runway, and Heidi Klum introduces this season's panel of judges. Besides her, she is joined by editor-in-chief of Elle magazine, Nina Garcia, the newest judge, a CFDA award-winning stylist, Law Roach, and also Christian Soriano, who technically isn't going to be a judge, but he's going to provide insight to the judges of how well the designers worked in the workroom for the challenge. And as the season goes on, they will be joined by a guest judge. Now on to the runway, starting with House of Villains. Yushin Ha. I love this look. She looks like she's attending her third husband's funeral, who mysteriously died of unknown causes. Angela Rosa. Not my style, but I don't hate it. She does look like a CEO of some big fashion magazine company that bullies her employees and sabotages anyone who's trying to overthrow her company. Alex Foxworth. Now this is very villain to me. She looks like she could play the stepmother of the 40th Cinderella remake because we don't have enough of those. VJ Floresca. I'm not getting villain from this. This just looks like someone who likes to wear a lot of black, and if I had to guess, maybe she kind of looks like a fashion student who bullies other people for their unique fashion sense, but I'm not getting villain from this. Jesus Estrada. This does look like a villain to me. This looks like the evil fairy godmother. Also, I just noticed that his model has a prop. Ethan Munt. If the last look was the evil fairy godmother, this was the witch that turned the godmother evil. I love the veil that doubles as a cape. I love the gold accents and the nail on the gloves. No notes. House of Villains is the clear winner. They were bound to win from the start because they were very organized and well put together, except for the whole thing with VJ and Jesus, but we're gonna push past that. But there is one thing I wish they did differently, which was incorporate more color into their collection. And I understand that black is the default color for evil, which racist. But there are other colors like green, purple, red, maybe even a dark navy blue. Because if you make an all black outfit and you put it in front of cameras, there's a lot of detail that gets lost because it's all one color and you'll only be able to see the detail if you're there in person. Jesus was the only one to use red in his design, which was refreshing to the eyes after seeing just a bunch of black. House of Princess. First up is Joseph McCrae. Nothing about this is giving princess. What princess on any universe, that being fantasy and real life, would wear something like this? My idea of a princess, which is referencing real life princesses, is that they are very modest and understated in what they wear. This is the total opposite of that. I still think the jacket and the color is really cool. It's just not appropriate for this category. Madeline Maleficent. I don't know if I'm saying her last name right, and I really want to say Maleficent, but I'm going to try my hardest not to slip up. Okay, her look. Again, not a princess. If I were to close my eyes and picture a princess, she's not wearing this. What princess do you know is sporting a cropped blouse with their midriff showing? Exactly. Melania Daly. I do like this look better than the other two. However, I think it looks cheap. The shiny fabric around the arms and up here and also on the trim of the dress make it look really low quality. And I think the cape is too dramatic for how simple the two-piece is. She could lose the cape, and again, I think it's way too exposed for it to be a princess. Not into it. Antonio Estrada. Now, I don't think this look is that bad. There is too much happening. The model doesn't have a shape. She's just engulfed in this pink tulle, and the butterfly print that he was so adamant should be their theme is barely noticeable. However, funny enough, compared to the last three looks, this gives more princess. It is short, but this is more princess-like than the others. Also, I just noticed that his model also has a prop. Casey Black. Oh. Yeah, this is a mess. This is a chop for me. I will say though, this is the first floor-length dress that we've seen, and this is the most princess-like looking outfit out of the entire collection. I do like the brocade fabric, I do like the color, and I do like the tulle. However, I wish what she did with the shoulder on one side of the dress was on the other side of the dress, but she just loves her asymmetry. And the tulle wrapping around the dress was a choice. I feel like if she just put the tulle at maybe like the hem of the dress and had the two tulle exaggerated shoulders, she might have been safe. But I could see a princess wearing this, though they might be featured on Worst Dressed. Joan Madison. Finally, a look fit for a princess, or in her words, a queen. This dress does look like something a queen would wear in a modern fantasy movie that is featured on the Hallmark Channel. I love it, no notes. And that is the end of the runway, and no one seems worried about being in the bottom and being sent home, which is hilarious to me because some of them should be worried that they are going to be in the bottom. House of Princess. So House of Villains obviously win, and the top three designers were Yushin, Jesus, and Ethan. All three of them get good critiques, however, La Roche does express his hatred for Jesus's look, and I don't fully agree. I actually quite enjoy Jesus's look, and listen, as the series goes on, I'm going to be harping on the Estrada brothers a lot. However, I cannot deny Jesus's talent for designing and making clothes. There were times in the show where I really liked the things that he made, and there were times where I thought that he should have won the challenge. However, it's just that him and his brother's attitude is really bad and sours my enjoyment for the show. Nina and Heidi both disagree with La Roche, saying that they actually love his look. However, La Roche does bring up a good point. He tells Jesus that he could have paid more attention to the proportions because he's dressing a curvier model, and that he could have done something better with the model's chest. And I do agree with that. I do feel like Jesus could have been more thoughtful about the placement of the model's breasts. The designer to win the entire challenge is Ethan Munt, which is not surprising to me at all. The top three head backstage with the rest of their team, and they just discuss what the judges told them. Then Jesus decides to bring up the whole lace debacle again and trying to spin it into a lesson for Yushin to listen to others and to take constructive criticism. However, Yushin isn't having it, and neither am I. Jesus is basically saying that Yushin would have to sacrifice his outfit for the sake of the collection, which again, in my opinion, there was nothing wrong with their collection. I'm trying not to make assumptions about the designers on the show because I don't know who they are off camera, but in this scene and in the entire episode, I feel like personally that Jesus sees himself in a more authoritative position than the rest of the designers because he has a successful business. Jesus mentioned earlier in the episode that after his season, he improved as a designer and built a successful business. And I think that he thinks that because he's the most successful designer in this competition, he's given himself permission to judge others not just on their looks, but also on their attitude and their professionalism. And I tell you what, he is not one to talk. There is no need to bring up the situation again, especially when you're on the winning team. Why would you bring down morale just to reignite old conflicts? I suspect that Jesus has this need to be right all the time and have the last word, which is why he brought everything back up again. Now it is time for the losers, House of Princess. The worst designers were Antonio, Casey, and Joseph McCrae. Everyone else is safe. And I agree with the bottoms. Heidi brings up how the collection was not cohesive, and that is surprising to no one. No one on that team thought it was a good idea to take charge and say, hey, we should probably have something in our collection to make it look like it came from the same place. The designers just disregarded the challenge and just did whatever they wanted to do, which leads me into the third reason why I did not like this season, because this becomes a reoccurring pattern. Some of the designers just don't follow the prompt they are given. In previous seasons, the designers understood and followed the directions of the challenge, which is the bare minimum. I don't know what's going on this season, but some of these designers seem to not care about the challenges that they're given and just go off into their own world and do whatever they want and just ignore the judges and their mentor, thinking that they'll just win the season because of how good they are at making clothes. But if you're not following the challenges that you're given, you're not gonna make it that far. Watching the judging for this bottom three was incredibly cringy, because before the judges even say anything, Antonio says, "Am I being punked?" Heidi responds, "No." And then he says, "Okay." It was at this moment that I knew he was going to be a huge problem. They start with Joseph McRae, and they say exactly what I already said earlier. It's not giving princess. Nina says the proportions are way off, but Law actually likes the proportions on the model, which was surprising to me because I thought they were all gonna hate it. Final verdict, it was cool, but not appropriate for this challenge. Next was Antonio, and watching him get critiqued was like nails on a chalkboard. I literally had to pause every few seconds, take a breath, and prepare myself for what was going to happen next. Law says the outfit looks like if someone asked ChatGPT to make them a dress, and now I can't unsee it. Antonio says that he changed his design a couple of times after Christian's critique and says that there's actually a dress under this AI looking coat. The judges asked to see the coat, and when he reveals the dress underneath, which is the same dress that we saw earlier, the judges actually like it. They said if the model came down the runway with the coat opened, they would have liked it a lot more, and there's a possibility that Antonio might have been safe. In the bottom, but safe. He then starts complaining about why he covered up the dress, referring to when Christian told him that his intern can make it in 30 minutes. Law tells Antonio to stop blaming Christian because he brought up his name a lot during the critiques, and yeah, Christian's critiques are not the reason why you're in the bottom. You're in the bottom because the judges believe that your outfit was the worst out of the entire collection. It is not Christian's fault that you were in this position. All Christian said, or from what we can see on camera, is that the dress could be more, and apparently your idea of more was to make a shapeless coat to cover up your basic butterfly print dress. And then, once again, Antonio thinks it's a good idea to now say in front of the judges that he is a Gemini, does not take criticism well, and doesn't like being told what to do. But wait, it gets worse, because Nina says that he's being defensive, Law agrees and said that he's also being quite rude and that he shouldn't take these criticisms too personally. He then responds with, "Maybe it's the Latina in me," followed by, "Next," in a disrespectful tone.
Be nice. I'm finding it. It take you that long to find it?
I was ready for him to go home right then and there. I'm not about to deal with this for the next 9 episodes. Anyways, after that cringe-worthy mess, they move on to Casey. They said that her dress was like luster, that the tulle wrapped around seemed like an afterthought, and that it looked like a nightgown. So the three of them head backstage and let everyone else know how the judging went. Casey is upset and crying because she's in fear that she might go home again on the first episode. So Casey is eliminated from the competition, and in this season, they don't show who's sent home in the same episode. They leave it on a cliffhanger, and I'm not a fan of that. They usually would show who got eliminated in the same episode. I know why they did it, so that it's like a hook so you can keep coming back every week, but I'm just not a fan of it. They instead show who goes home in the beginning of the next episode. I will give Antonio some credit here. He does hug Casey and tell her to keep her head up as she's eliminated, which was very kind of him. I want to focus on his behavior though. He portrayed himself very poorly. He's been doing that this entire episode, and this will continue as the season goes on, but his attitude was at its worst here. What he's failing to understand in this moment is that he's not just talking to the judges, he's also talking to his potential clients that could be watching the show. And what he's telling them is that he has a bad attitude. He doesn't take criticism well. He gets defensive. He shifts blame onto other people. And when things don't go his way or get too stressful, he wants to quit. This is not a good first impression, and you are not going to last long in this industry. If your response to constructive criticism is to get defensive and say everyone's being mean to you, then run away and start crying, then you are not going to last long in this industry, and being a fashion designer is not for you. This career is not for the faint of heart. And that is the end of episode 1 of season 21 of Project Runway. If you like this video, please leave a like, and if you want to be notified for when more videos come out, hit that notification bell. And also, leave some suggestions in the comments of what else I should review, and also tell me your opinion on this season of Project Runway. Do you also think it was a disappointment? Did you also not like some of the designers and the changes that they made in the show? Let me know. I want to start a discussion. If you want to follow me, here are my handles. They are going to be linked in the description below, and I'll see you next time. And nobody make a comment on my hair. I know it looks bad, okay? Don't comment on it.